Thank you. Thank you.
大家好 Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi everyone.
How are we all? How are you doing?
I'm
大家好唔好啊? Thank you. Great. So without further ado, I just want to quickly introduce my friend here, Dominic. He is from a legal background and very sound in legality. He's also very much into Web3 himself. And it's an honor to be speaking with him and moderating today, I guess. We'll probably take this on a more fireside chat structure so that it's not so proper. Would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself, Dominic?
Thanks, Daniel. I should ask about you. You've obviously got CEO of GoGoChart, and we'll come back to that because I've got questions for you too. But I'm a technology lawyer, an intellectual property lawyer at Baker McKenzie in Hong Kong, and I specialize in IP and technology and data law relating to Hong Kong and Greater China more generally. And I've taken a real interest in Metaverse and the Web3 space. And so I'm delighted to be here today. It's not my first time in Cyberport, and hopefully we'll get through some interesting issues that will be really helpful to everyone considering operating in the Metaverse. Yeah.
Great. A real quick intro. I run a marketing firm that specializes in digital as well as Web3. So that I think in the past 12 months, obviously Metaverse, NFT, GameFi, blockchain, DAO, Move to Earn, learn to earn, everything. These have all been really massively hot, trending keywords. What would you say would be, can you tell us a bit more about the term Metaverse? And actually, what would be the legal concerns for brands potentially going into Metaverse? We're seeing a lot more brands, right, launching their buying land in the Metaverse, launching their NFT Web3 project. What would be the legal concern if there are any brands here or that are watching this video, recorded ones in the future, that they should be paying attention to?
Thanks, Daniel. So I, as a company that also advises brands in the Metaverse, I'm sure that you've heard stories from your clients and come across a lot of these issues. So what do we talk about when we talk about the Metaverse? Well, a Metaverse is essentially a persistent digital interactive space. It may consist of, virtual reality, augmented reality. It may be decentralized or distributed. It may be centralized. It is not one thing. There is no one metaverse. There are multiple metaverses out there. And the number of legal issues that occur in or that are relevant to metaverses are the same number of legal issues and variety of legal issues as are relevant to the world we live in, because the idea is to create a multiverse, a distributed number of different metaverses that replicate the real world and allow us to interact virtually. And so we come across lots of legal issues, and the ones that are salient to me are data privacy and security, intellectual property, so protection of intellectual creations and assets in metaverses when moving into this new space. Obviously consumer protection, but then also financial regulatory issues, commercial regulatory issues, risk and compliance, so anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing. There's a long tail of legal issues basically that exist. Also, what happens if there's a dispute in the metaverse? Which law applies? How do you resolve it? So essentially, these are the sorts of things that come up. They're as diverse as the issues in the real world. I will call out, first of all, just privacy and data security, because I think that this is something close to my practice area. And as you can imagine, in the internet that preceded metaverses, right? So when we interact with social media platforms, we give over a lot of our data. We can see a privacy policy, so we can see what the platform, let's say Meta, for example, is going to do with our personal data. We can see how they're going to share it. We can see how it's going to be used and monetized. We don't have much control over it. In metaverses, there's actually more data going to be absorbed by companies and by operators of metaverse spaces. Because if you imagine you put on say a VR headset, this VR headset can do a number of different things, like track the movement of your eyes if you're shopping in a virtual environment, so it can focus on what you are looking at. It would also potentially collect data from your hands if you're using haptic gloves to sort of touch things or interact with things in a metaverse environment, which would mean that it collects a lot of data, biometric data, effectively not only about your behavior but also about your body, your physique as well. And all of these may be sensitive kinds of personal data. Now in Hong Kong there isn't a separate concept of sensitive personal data that requires a higher level of, specifically a higher level of treatment in terms of consent or so on. But in other jurisdictions, it may be. Like for example, in the mainland, there is a concept of sensitive personal data. In Singapore, there is a concept of sensitive personal data. But I think the main challenges that come out of this is really, how do you give meaningful consent if your consent must be collected? Like for example, if you go into a metaverse space, you have your, you might be there with an avatar and you buy something in that metaverse. Maybe you provide a real world email address. What about the consent that you have to give, under Hong Kong law at least, for them to use that personal data in direct marketing? How do you give that in a metaverse context where you are appearing in your avatar, which may be, I don't know, a giraffe or Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that? How do you actually give your consent in this 3D space? Will there be a pop-up privacy policy? Will you have, a series of different ways of agreeing to a certain use of your data or a certain collection of a kind of data or not? The other thing is, generally speaking, companies operating in the metaverse, and you may have experienced this as well, Daniel, would be, if you want to sell something in a metaverse space, you might do a collaboration with a metaverse space provider, like a platform. You would enter into agreements with them about how data will be processed. But who actually has the regulatory liability? Are you both data users, like data controllers as it would be termed in the GDPR in Europe, or are you, is the technology provider just a data processor? So how do you allocate liability? You need to re-examine your contracts on these points and determine how to apportion it. Also, there need to be agreed standards on data security in the metaverse, because there are so many points at which data could be leaked. It could be through a VR headset, haptic gloves, like I said. There could be bad actors in the metaverse who come in and want to take information about you, your identity, again, steal information from your wallet, and so on and so forth. There are these points of vulnerability. So data privacy and security is a real issue. Another I mentioned for brands is intellectual property protection, and how do you need to do anything else to protect your trademarks, for example, when you are using them or licensing them to others to use in a metaverse space? So do your trademark registrations cover use in metaverses or non-fungible tokens, or use in relation to by avatars? Does that constitute commercial use? There are all of these things to consider when considering intellectual property protection. Not to mention non-fungible tokens, which I think we'll come to later. And then the other side of it is, of course, consumer protection. I think the important thing for brands to remember is that a consumer entering a space needs to have a very a way of understanding what it is that they are purchasing, if they are purchasing a good or a service, what they can do if something is not to their satisfaction, like what is a faulty good or a service in a metaverse, like how is that determined? How would they go about complaining? Is the platform going to take responsibility for an experience, or is the brand that's selling a product going to be responsible in some way? So having that a set of terms and conditions that is binding on a consumer that is entering a metaverse space is incredibly important. And maybe the agreements that you have with existing two-dimensional service providers are not adequate. So that's something else to consider. And then there's a number of other issues. If consumers are using cryptocurrencies, how are they regulated? Are you using a cryptocurrency that is generally recognized as more secure than others? Is there potential for fraud or money laundering if you're using quite a rare coin, for example, to transact in a metaverse space? So how are you protecting your consumers in that way? And what recourse might they have against you if something goes wrong for them in your space? So that's another issue as well.
Very fruitful. That was extremely insightful. Dominic, thank you. A real quick exercise I think we should involve the audience as well. Who here has a wallet, a crypto token wallet? Does anybody have? Wallet, please raise your hand. Probably nearly a half. and and the rest. That's awesome. So who here has been hacked? So that's basically it. What would you do? Oh, yeah. So
scammed.
Yeah, scam. I think that would be a good one. So I wanted to share a bit of an experience that my MetaMask wallet was hacked, and so obviously there was nothing I could do. I couldn't sue. I tried. I think I consulted a friend of mine who's actually our in-house legal lawyer, and there was nobody that we could go to really to sue because we don't even know the person who stole it or the entity. There was an address, but then the address only stole whatever's in the wallet. So what happened was I clicked a clickbait. Basically, I staked some funds in a crypto fund, and then it was paying interest, etc. This was back in the days when the bull market, and and then they announced an airdrop. So I clicked into it, and within 7 seconds, my wallet was cleared. Yeah, like within 10 seconds, basically. It's crazy. Yeah. So and then there was no way I could get the funds back. It wasn't a huge. Luckily, it wasn't a huge amount of funds. It was, but still, it was my hard-earned cash, right? So, what would you recommend, Dominic? I'll fire this question back to you. For someone like me, and actually, there's a community of people that have been ruffled, as well as scammed and hacked online. There's a community right now. I'm part of one of those community. Who do they go to? I think I was reading the forum as well as some of the comments in the group, and they were saying they tried contacting the police, and the police obviously didn't give them any support or help because they wouldn't know where to go, the police, even the local enforcement. So what would you say to that?
I think that there are so many. It's a good question, Daniel. And I think there are so many different types of scam. And I've done one where I thought I was buying Murakami flowers, and it was sent to it was an address on I think it was one on Twitter that was, I think, one decimal point away from the real address, and I sent money from my wallet to that, and obviously never saw it again. But I could identify the address, so I have a series of alphanumeric characters. I know where the money went to. So it's not to say that crypto cannot be traced, because that is not the case. It may be anonymous in the sense that you do not have to attach a real name to a crypto wallet address, but keeping evidence of where, for example, if you can identify that your money has gone from your specific wallet address to another specific wallet address, then keeping a record of that is important. That's for evidence purposes. Obviously, going to the police, generally in most jurisdictions, a cryptocurrency is recognized as an asset. This is property. It is something that is recognizable as theft if someone dupes you into transferring your funds into or your cryptocurrencies to another wallet. Something can be done. The question is, practically speaking, how are the police going to trace it? There have been successful cases where they can piece together information to identify the owner of a particular wallet that has been stealing from others, for example. But more to the point, practical things that you can do. It's not just legal recourse. You should take action to change your passwords, do a malware scan, report it to any exchange or any website where the money was taken, because they could be also accumulating evidence that particular wallet address has been accumulating or absorbing funds or transactions from other wallets in a systematic way. So maintaining evidence is important. Obviously, we're in a new space now where the authorities are not familiar with enforcement, right, and with tracing. But we're getting there. We're getting to the stage where that is possible. The other thing is, same thing with other wrongdoing in the metaverse space. What if someone infringes your trademark, but by walking around in a space, say wearing your brand or insulting your brand, let's say, in a metaverse space, and you can't identify them because they're there appearing as their avatar. Like, what can you do in that sense? Or they're selling products under something that looks like your brand. Well, do you have an infringement case for trademark infringement? How do you identify the infringer? Are they using this in a fair way? Would they claim a defense to trademark infringement by saying this is like artistic commentary? These are all issues that are coming up in all jurisdictions around the world at the moment. And I think the key point is to not make your brand a target for these things by boosting your trademark protection, making sure you're covered for uses in Metaverse or NFTs, for example. Often there's a case where someone else will take your brand or your artwork. So brand would be infringement of trademark rights. An artwork would be copyright, and then minted as an NFT. Do they have the right to do that? Well, no. But ultimately, what's going to happen? Are you going to bring a case in court? Is the platform going to delist the NFT from the platform? They may do, but there are so many of these cases that there may be a huge delay in them taking any action to protect your work. So you need to, indulge, get involved, be proactive about protecting your brand, and also monitoring as well. There are monitoring services on current e-commerce platforms in the traditional internet, and there are monitoring services that will be operating in metaverse spaces as well. So taking advantage of those is important. But yeah, Daniel, it's an uphill battle, and we've all experienced these kinds of scams, and will probably continue to.
I would definitely recommend not to access your own wallet in the public Wi-Fi environment. Obviously, do not share your key phrases. I think that's one of those areas that a lot of people do not pay much attention to. So it is essentially your wallet. So if you access it all the time in the public domain and public area, it definitely increases your risk of being hacked and scammed. So that's one area. I think we've got just a bit of time to talk about one more topic. Let's talk about DAO. I don't know if anyone knows about DAO, but DAO has been an extremely hot keyword as well, and some DAO have actually received fundraising from and even the likes of Andreessen. And how would that work? And can you explain a bit about DAO and also the legality involved if for an organization like DAO, how would legal plays a part, and how would legal plays a part in managing the structure potentially?
So a speed run at explaining DAOs and legal concepts around them. Okay, we have a couple of minutes. So DAO is distributed autonomous organization. Okay, so this is a form of organization that essentially relies on code to operate, right? So to perform its management functions rather than on people, like physically, doing things. So for example, there was actually an investment distributed autonomous organization in 2016 that ran on the Ethereum blockchain that was designed to pool investments from different people, and then each of them would have voting rights based on their ownership of a token, right, which was basically a piece of code encoded in a smart contract that would allow them to vote on the investment decisions that were made. This was hacked due to a glitch in the code, and about $70 million worth of Ethereum was taken from that. That was 2016. Since then, people have learned that there is a risk to DAOs, to DAOs, but there is also advantages, and that is that they're more democratic. They don't rely on a central authority to make decisions. The decisions are made by whoever holds a token or whoever has the voting rights, usually represented by a cryptographic token. That the decisions that are made or the operations that are carried out are run by that code, and it will just continue to run itself. So it's actually a lot more operationally efficient. It is agile as well because the members then vote on how to change the code that governs the behavior of the DAO. Issue is it a legal, is it a legal entity? Well, it's not a company, and it's not a limited liability partnership or anything like that. But some jurisdictions have started to provide this kind of legal recognition to these. So Wyoming, the state in the US, for example, is now saying that you can incorporate it. Well, you can have a DAO as a limited liability company, which means that essentially the members or the different members of the DAO their liability would be limited. They wouldn't have, if something went really, really wrong, they would not be pursued individually to pay money or to be sued by, but they would also have the status of a legal entity that could sign contracts, enter into negotiations, and they would have some kind of status under the law, which could also bring them tax benefits. Singapore have also experimented with this. So there's a number of different ways that there could be advantages and disadvantages for DAO. The question whether you run a metaverse along the lines of a DAO depends on what the DAO actually wants to do, and whether you're actually just setting up a DAO for the sake of it, or whether it actually would be more practical and would be more efficient in reality to have your organization or your metaverse run by pre-programmed code rather than run by people making decisions in a very slow and clunky way.
Thank you, Dominic, for such an insightful sharing. We've got probably a bit of time to open the floor to the audience for one question. Does anybody want to ask a question now that we're wrapping up? No? Okay. Just maybe one real quick comment to summarize. Thank you, Dominic, by the way. I think the whole concept of Metaverse, NFT, GameFi, DeFi, DAO, these are very new topic to the mass audience, to the mass public, the mass market. It's not critically acclaimed yet, which means the adoption rate is still early. It's still very new. And in Web3, things are moving really fast. Like things could be happening within a day or a week, a market could crash, which, we're experiencing something really crazy right now. And during the bear market, those who can survive obviously would probably stand with quality. And I think to promote Cyberport, and thank you Cyberport obviously for inviting us here today. Delve is a wonderful event. We've been here 3 years straight. So I think the whole purpose of this is not just to educate and share, but we also want to promote to the public so that we can attract more talent. We need a lot more talent. I think the last session was on about talent as well for GameFi, right? My session will be about Web3, and I'm sure the legality side as well. I'm not sure how many legal lawyers here are Web3 sounds in Hong Kong and globally. So I think there's a massive shortage for talent globally everywhere. And this is a good way to promote and invest into younger generations, which is what we do actually.
Yeah,
thank you.
I think education is key, Daniel, and I would just say that there's loads of opportunities in this space. There's obviously loads of risks as well, and that people are only just becoming aware of, and there's always new risks popping up. Happy to take questions afterwards. Reach out to me. I want to help people in this space, not fall into the traps. So yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you, Delph. Thank you to the organisers for all of this, and thank you all of you for coming, and also those who've dialed in through Decentraland from the Metaverse. Hi.